We are back, Coast to Coast AM. Connie Willis here with you. Hope you are having a good evening, enjoying the show, enjoying the music, and enjoying our guest, Jeremiah Horstman. He is going to be telling us more about the Bradshaw Ranch, the history of it, and the stories the encounters that he's experienced himself. But right now, he's continuing to tell us I'll just let him finish it. Yeah, because I think you did already say Bigfoot, right? It was two creatures that were big and boulders that were happening when he was 13.
Yes. I'm going to wrap this up quick so we can move on to the Bradshaw Ranch. More or less the subject at hand, but the latter part of this story as it goes, the short version of it, is we did, as we were told by the lead investigator, to come back up into the open properties behind where my grandmother's house was. And as we did so, the clouds broke. And I'll never forget, there was the kind of bluish-gray hue of light you see when there's a decent-sized moon and starlight. It illuminated the open ground that we were looking at. To the distance, we could see pinpoints of light, which were flashlights on the ground. My mother, my brother, and the lead investigator had turned on their lights as well, and we're looking for, I found out later, we're looking for footprints, thinking that the creatures had actually gotten by them and moved on to the south. And as we were approaching them, we had our lights off. And we came to probably about 30 yards from the property line, maybe not quite that, of my grandmother's property. And suddenly, from our right, the tree line, two very tall, black-furred creatures jumped out in front of us. And I was stunned. I remember freezing, and the investigator grabbed me again. He put his big hand on my chest to stop me. And I instinctively went to raise the flashlight, and he said no. And he pushed the flashlight down. And we're seeing, and this transpired in a matter of seconds, these two very tall, lanky creatures running from my right to left. They weren't looking at us. They had their shoulders turned because they didn't appear to have necks. The head seemed to sit right on the shoulders. And they were looking toward the pinpoints of light, the flashlights. The first one leading the second one. It was immediately behind. The second one was immediately behind the first one, maybe by 3 or 4 paces. And then he said, go, hit your light. I turned my flashlight on and hit these two creatures with the light. The second one that was trailing the first one turned and looked at us. And I remember seeing green eyes. And there was a wide set space between the two green eyes. They were glowing, but it wasn't like they were glowing from us hitting them with a flashlight, a reflection. They seemed to be giving off their own light. It seemed to be startled by us being there and ran a little bit faster and actually bumped into the one in front of it as it was running. That one turned and looked at us, and they both sped up. And as they sped up, the most peculiar part that a lot of people at that time found hard to believe when Devin and I told them was that they started to fade out and disappear. And again, this happened in a matter of seconds, but I always liken it to the old handheld camcorders of the time. They all had a fade button that you could press, and when you would press the fade button, it would fade to black in a very, very short period of time. It would black out the image. And they seemed in that same speed to fade out into nothing, transparent, and then just completely vanish. And they were gone, just like that. And we went in all of our excitement to tell everyone else what we had just seen, because they were paces away within view of us. They were also in turn shocked that we had seen these things and they didn't see them themselves. And that started a 2.5-year period of repeated sightings for other people in that area, including other locals whom I'll never know because they kept their cases silent as well. We chose to do the same, but my cousin would end up seeing them on the property. Her son would see them. A neighbor I knew down the street that was a school friend of mine would also see them. And other investigators would come and see them. I think most notably Paul Johnson from Duquesne University from another organization. He wasn't with PSU. He came down one time and leaned over to smell some bushes after a really heavy rain. He could smell this putrid smell. And unknowing to him, he was a big guy, 6'5". He had a trucker cap on, a cup of coffee. The creature was in there, and it stood up and actually brushed a big hairy arm across his face, knocked off his ball cap, and he stumbled backwards, almost spilled his coffee, and he said, he described him later, so like bulldozers rolling down over the hill. So that whole area was very, very active at that time. But at 1993, when 1993 came, it just stopped. It stopped, and we'll never know why. So fast forward to 1999, the psych hospital was closing down. My mother decides she wants to move to Arizona, where they're in desperate need of psych nurses. And she asked my brother and I, who at the time are now 22 years old, do you boys want to come with me? There doesn't seem to be much opportunity here. There's likely more opportunities in Arizona, certainly for me. Do you want to go? And, of course, we both did. And so we got up and moved to Arizona.
What a difference. What a whole difference in landscape, you know. I mean, you're going from Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. Well, not, I guess at that point it was, you were Cannonsburg, right?
Yes. And that's
just outside of that.
From Pittsburgh. It's about a 25-minute drive.
But then Sedona, holy cow, that's like going to Mars.
Oh, yeah. Big difference. Big difference. It's funny you should say going to Mars, because my first impression when getting here is the red rocks. The red rocks make you think of Martian land.
Mars, yeah. Now, that's what I thought.
In the time I left, every day from that day in September 1991, I always thought about what I'd seen. And the investigators, got down on one knee and put a hand on my shoulder and told me the statistical rarity of seeing something like that. And it never left my mind. I'll never see something like this ever again. I'm so privileged. I'm so humbled and so grateful to have been a part of that whole episode for a couple of years there. But for me, the main sighting was that September 21st in 1991. And I thought, I'll never see anything like that again. So we get to Arizona, and I just moved here and had pains in my back, which I ignored. Ended up turning out to be cancer, stage 3 cancer. And they gave me 3 months to live. And I got very kind of dejected and depressed, and they said, we're going to put you through chemotherapy. We're going to have to do surgery as well, which I did. And I thought, why bother with the chemotherapy if I've got 3 months to live? And the chemotherapy actually saved my life, and it gave me a new beginning. And
so you went ahead and did it anyway, even though you thought, hey, I'm not going to do it. Why?
Yes. And I was going to say no, but my mother and my brother at the time, we had just moved here. We had no friends. It drew us closer together. We had no family here. The rest of our family was back in Pennsylvania. And the two of them really pulled together and without showing too much of their own depression, forced me more or less to do the chemotherapy because they wanted me to have a shot.
A chance.
Around.
Yeah.
And I did survive, long story short, and suddenly I've got what could be a whole life ahead of me. And I did just out of wanting something fun to do, the Zaki Film School had opened up here, and they were looking for volunteers and people that knew how to do the sound nagras and do gray card readings for films and pictures that were being shot. And so I added my name to their database because I had experience doing that. And they were reshooting a Western here in Arizona, and I ended up getting more or less asked to do as a volunteer help on the set. I also was able to ride horses from my days on our farm, and that was one of the main reasons they wanted me to come. They wanted me to be on horseback. And they loaded us up on school buses at the high school, and we rode over a maze of dirt roads, and we were going down a long hill to where I could see a ranch ahead of us. And I was so struck with the beauty of the area, I remember turning to somebody and saying, what is this place? And one of them turned and said, you don't know? This is the famous Bradshaw Film Ranch. I had never heard of it until that point. I was like, oh, okay, Bradshaw Film Ranch. And we parked in a dusty lot, and they walked us to this set, which was a actual Old West town, a full-length street, very long. And it wasn't like the traditional Hollywood two-dimensional set. It was actual three-dimensional buildings on both sides of the road, right down to the detail. Even a saloon with the two swinging doors, that you'd expect to see Clint Eastwood leaning on, smoking a cigar. And I got a chance to walk around the set, and it smelled really old. I could tell it had been there a long time. You could smell the old wood that was baked from the summer sun. There were cobwebs hanging down. It was really incredible. And so I got through the few days that I worked on this project. It was just as a volunteer, made nothing from it, but had fun, and it was something that I really enjoyed doing. And that was the end of the Bradshaw Ranch at the time for me, and kind of put it back in the consciousness, put it on the shelf, so to speak.
So were you there often or just one time?
Just that one time. That was my first experience of hearing about the Bradshaw Ranch.
Any vibes or anything? Did you pick up anything at all?
No, when I was there, the only thing that struck me was the beauty of it. As far as like feeling some sort of like an ambiance of strangeness or high strangeness, as we call it now, I didn't feel that at all. And I think part of it too was I was just so in awe of the place to be there. I had no idea that there was a film set like this that was right here in Arizona, right outside of Sedona. So, in fact, I should mention to the viewers, the Bradshaw Ranch is about 12 miles outside of town. And the first part of the road to it is paved, and then the greater portion of the road is a dirt, rocky road. It's a very rough road getting in there, and it's best to have a four-wheel drive with high clearance to get to it. And the fact that they got school buses down there with us on it, I remember it being a very bouncy ride, was something I look back on now, and it gives me a smile because it's not easy to get to. But I found out later that Bob Bradshaw was a really interesting guy. Really, he and his family really did a good part, not just for Sedona, but I think northern Arizona, because Bob was an interesting character. He was a real cowboy, and he was born in China in 1918. I think he moved to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 4. And he was traumatized in his youth when he moved to Ohio because he and his friends had come across a body of a drunk who had been hit by a train. And he swore after he had heard that man had been drinking that he'd never drink or smoke. And for a cowboy in Arizona at that time period, they all drank.
Oh, yeah.
Very rare. But he didn't. He didn't drink or smoke, save for one moment that made him famous, which I'll tell you about in just a second. He bought his first camera in 1936 with a 35 millimeter, and he was just obsessed with photography. And that's probably one of the better things he's known for in Arizona, because Arizona Highways, a famous photography magazine, has a lot of his photographs in it. He took incredible photographs of the area. And I think he bought that first camera. It was like $12.50. So that was an investment that got him started in photography. And he was still very interested in learning photography before he graduated high school. In 1949, I think he had his first photo studio here in Sedona. Had his first wife, a woman named Beatrice. And at that time, Marlboro is the number one smoke in the country. They were looking to shoot an advert with a real cowboy. And one of their photographers was told, you need to meet this guy, Bob Bradshaw. He's the real deal. And the backdrop you'll get on his property is the kind of thing we think you're looking for. So this photographer met Bob, and Bob said, hey, I don't smoke, bud. And the man said, well, can you fake it? And so Bob would tell people later on that even though he was not a smoker, and they took that photograph, he said, I just faked it, and he gave a wink.
Yeah, it was more like, how much? How much do you want me to do for? Okay.
Yeah. And that was one of his first touches with fame there. His image was all over the place as one of the very first Marlboro men photographed. And I think his first visit to Sedona, if I'm not mistaken, was in 1945. And he came back after traveling all 48 states. He said he was looking for a place to settle. Ended up coming back to Sedona in 1947, and he purchased a piece of property in the Chapel area. So the Chapel area is quite a distance from where the current Bradshaw Ranch is. It's off of 179. And he told somebody that had asked him about the property, he said it was only 4 acres for $40, but it was a paradise that captured our hearts. And from a short time later, he got the opportunity to buy a parcel of land from a prominent family locally that had several ranches called the Hancock family. And that would become his ranch, which he bought in 1960. That was, at the time, 140 acres, which I think he spent $200 per acre for that. And that would become the Bradshaw Ranch. And he laid down a foundation for a gate near the house, which is still there now. And he put his initials in it. I don't know if I sent you that photograph, but you'll see BB 1960, where he put that with a stick in the concrete where he laid his foundation. And that would become his famous film ranch. He was a carpenter, and he was very good at that sort of work and helped with a lot of films that were being shot at the time. And most specifically, he was a cattleman, so he was very good with cattle and horses. So when film productions came to town, he would help build sets. He would loan cattle, I should say rent cattle, and horses, and he did mild horse stunts. He always said that he did the easy stunts. He let others do the difficult stuff. So he carved himself a niche here in Sonoma and brought a lot of business to town. At the time, Sonoma was really a small town, and he brought many full-length feature films here. He met Henry Fonda. He met Elvis Presley in '67 on his own ranch. And then after his wife Beatrice died, I'd like to note, too, Beatrice used to tell people that were friends of her family that at night she didn't like to go outside on the ranch because she said, quote, demons would come out of the canyons. And this she told to a friend of the family, which I noted later as being interesting because it would definitely indicate that strange things were being seen or heard, if not mentioned to many people publicly at that time. So she passed away, I believe, of cancer, and Bob met Linda and married Linda. And Linda was a very spiritual lady, and she liked to spend a lot of her time outside. And that's where in the early 1990s, because she spent time outside, she saw her first orb fly over. And that would cause the whole lid, I guess you could say, to blow off for the activity down there. They saw everything from orbs, a white Bigfoot creature that was spending time around one of their pregnant mares, which they saw so often they named her Big Girl. They saw UFOs, and Bob didn't like to come outside at night. After he was done with his livestock, he'd stay inside and watch TV, and didn't want to come out. And on one occasion, he did witness a very large UFO come over the East Hill and land in their orchard during broad daylight, followed by 100 small orbs, which you could see in the daylight. And after that, he said it was a heck of a thing to see, and he was a believer at that point on after seeing in broad daylight a very large disc land in their orchard. And so the activity at that time was just off the charts, but they were trying to keep much of it to themselves because, just like myself with the Bigfoot sighting, you don't want people to think you're crazy, even your own family. And so you see something that fantastic, and your first inclination is you want to tell people about it, but then you pause and you think, what is this going to do to my reputation? People are not going to believe me. No matter what I say, no matter how much conviction I have behind what I've seen, no one will believe me. So,
and they'll remember the story that you told them for the rest of your life and theirs. And they'll always look at you with that look every time. Stay with us. We are talking with Jeremiah Horstman, and we've got all sorts of experiences to tell you about from the Bradshaw Ranch coming up. Stay with us and do a little swinging of the hips now with a Ring My Bell here on Coast to Coast AM. Yeah. It is Coast to Coast AM. Connie Willis here. Wow, I can't believe it. Time flies when you're on this show. It really, really does. This is our last segment. I want to remind you that, hey, join my show, Blue Rock Talk. It is a great show, live streaming. You're going to have friends forever. You can become a Blue Rocker. Go to ConnieWillis.com to learn more and go on live investigations with me. But even if we don't get to go out on investigations, we're talking a lot and having a good time. You really will. It's a community. It's really nice. You can talk about what you've seen, what others have seen. You can ask people that have had encounters, anything you want to ask. I mean, we're open with it. Have a good time, and heck, the whole time during being on Coast to Coast, they're in the live group that I have and just chatting away, and everybody's talking and everybody's having a good time, and it's really nice. So if you'd like to do that, it's Blue Rock Talk at ConnieWillis.com, and lots of other fun things there too. You can sign up for my newsletter while you're there, and I hope that you do. I hope that you do. Fall is here. Wonderful things happening. Halloween coming up, as well as the football and still the grill. I still, I'm grilling out. I can do that when it's snowing. That's an okay thing with me. But all the good, it just seems like it gets a little spookier as well. So we're talking about the Bradshaw Ranch. We got Jeremiah Horstman in, and he's telling us, he was giving us the history of Bob and the Bradshaw Ranch. And we've, Jeremiah, like I said, it flies, right? Time flies. This is our last segment. And I want to hear your spooky encounters, because I know you've had some really, give us your top stuff here to let us know what actually happens on that ranch, what encounters that you think are the most unique of all, that's maybe only unique to Bradshaw Ranch.
Absolutely. Our first time in, going on Tom Tongo's book, we were taking two cameras with us, two Sonys, And he had mentioned in some of his writing to take 2 photographs when you're doing any investigation, 2 photographs of anything. And at Bradshaw Ranch, random photographs seemed to prove that there was a great deal of activity there because you weren't thinking about taking a photo. You were just taking it. So anything that could read your mind, so to speak, wouldn't be ready for you to take a photo. We did so on our first trip. We were walking around during the daylight, and when we got home after a peaceful visit there, though we did feel like we were being watched, we loaded our photos, and one set of photos actually just struck us dumb because standing in a dry wash just downhill from us was what looked to me to be a giant insect. It looked maybe like an ant, or it looked more like a praying mantis to me, with a bluish head, very large black eyes, and a black robe.
Now, let me ask you something about that,
Sure.
because a lot of people say they see ant people, and then a lot of people say they see praying mantises. Now, to me, are you only talking about the head part, or are with the praying? Because with the praying mantis, you immediately think of the arms with the praying, So, did you see that kind of body part, or is it more of the head that you're talking about?
At that time in the photo, we could only see the head. And it was bluish, and I can tell from later experience it was a praying mantis type being, because after that night, that particular phenomena changed our lives. It seemed to follow us home, and we had repeated visits by that creature here at our home in Sedona, and by ones that looked different from that one. I saw 2 that looked whitish in color in our home, and another one that was actually a shiny black color, and it was bigger than the others. Which sounds terrifying. It was terrifying in the when we saw the photograph, but the experiences that we've had as contactees with these things has been very soothing. When they speak in a thought projection or telepathy, they speak in what I can only describe as the softest, kindest female voice you've ever heard. And that repeat experience at home is something that Alexander and I decided to keep in private. But that changed our lives even more so, that very first visit there.
So let me just stop you again. Okay, so out at the Bradshaw Ranch, you see like a praying mantis, and there's telepathy happening.
Yes.
But this one is also coming to your home?
Yes. We only saw one, and there's only one in the photograph, which shows you can see a bluish head with black eyes and a black robe. And the ones that I see occasionally here at home at night also have long robes, and they're decorative. There's something decorative on the robes. I don't know if it's jewels or what, but there's long parallel lines vertically.
Now, one more question before you get back into it. So you said that there's communication. You don't want to talk about what you're getting at home. You want to save that for yourselves. That's fine. You can tell whatever you want or not. I'm not going to push you. But what is the conversation otherwise that you would say that you get with them?
It's usually a great deal of things about humankind, the path of humankind, and I guess you could say a lot of criticism of humankind. There's much more to it than that, but I think what I'm getting from them basically is that there's a great need for correction in the path of humankind. We're straying from, I guess, what we were originally intended to be, and they and I guess others are trying to bring that to the greater collective consciousness, and they're selecting certain people to assist in that. That's just a part of it. There's more of a personal part of it, too, for us that my girlfriend really wanted to keep in private, but that whole instance started off our need to keep going back to Bradshaw Ranch.
So they're trying to wake us up, but are they saying, hey, we're going to help you, we're going to do anything about it too, or just, hey, you all need to wake up?
Yes, they are trying to, in some ways, actively help to bring a better consciousness to people and bring us off a straight path, if you will. Now, in a parallel to that, it seems that the Anasazi, the local Native Americans who lived here and disappeared 750 years ago, saw the same creatures. Because in our investigation, we found 5 different pictographs right here in the canyons in the Sedona area depicting the exact same beings, one of which I sent to you, which is probably on the website now. But it appears to be a large mantis-like being wearing a robe, and it's hard to see in the lighting in the photograph that I sent you, but you can actually see even the same decorative adornment on the robes that I see whenever I see these beings. And
that's at coasttocoastam.com. Do you have a name for this one particular that you talk with?
No.
No.
Whenever I see them, it seems to me that they just, it's a difficult thing, because whenever they do show up, sometimes I'm able to move, sometimes I'm not able to, sometimes I can talk, sometimes I cannot. But it's become a repeated thing over the past 11 years. That was 11 years ago, as of the end of this summer, that we first encountered those. But since then, going back to the ranch over and over again, both of us have had Bigfoot encounters, UFO sightings out there, a subject called the Invisibles that was dubbed by Tom Dongo. These beings that can walk up to you, hear the footsteps, and you can't see anything in front of you. And on occasion, you can make out a transparent, I hate to use a movie reference, but like the 1985 Predator, you'll see a transparent form, a humanoid form lumbering up on you. And I was able to see one of those also just north of Bradshaw Ranch on a exploration with my girlfriend in one of the canyons, not quite 2 miles from the ranch. We were coming back in near pitch-black darkness in a canyon that doesn't have a trail. And she shouted out to me, I hear footsteps behind me. And I instinctively turned around and took a photograph with a flash. And I knew that I caught it because the flash lit up the image of a very large humanoid creature trying to step off the path behind Alexandra. I shouldn't say path. It wasn't much of a path. We're in a dry wash. And it illuminated the area within its outline brighter than the area around it. So I was able to see it quite well, and did capture that in the photograph as well, of this large lumbering form trying to step out from behind Alexandra when I whipped the camera up to take the picture. And the flash caught it. And so we got home and were able to load the 2 photographs I took. In one of the 2 photographs, I was quick enough and caught this thing that was very commonly seen at the ranch called the Invisibles, which upset Linda's dogs a lot. The dogs knew when they were there before anyone would see or hear them, because they would stand up and bark and growl. And they also hiss. She was hissed at once by these things.
Oh.
Yes, it's a very loud hiss that you can only liken to like a panther hissing or a large cat. It's very loud. And Linda was taken back by it, and she started to walk away and said, "Don't ever do that again. That's very rude." And in her book, she wrote, then I wondered if maybe that's the way they communicate from their dimension, and maybe it's a greeting. So she apologized and turned around and spoke out loud, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude to you if you were just trying to communicate." Well, I experienced the same thing in another canyon. We were coming back again in the dark after exploring and heard footsteps, and we stopped. And within moments of stopping, there was no insects, no birds, nothing. Suddenly, virtually right in my face, I heard a very loud hiss, which made me jump. I almost fell over because it took me back, so couldn't see.
Well, did it sound nice? Did it sound like a hello, or did it sound like back off?
I really do think it was a hello.
Okay.
It didn't seem to me to be trying to scare me. I was frightened, but you could also feel like you were being watched. It wasn't like it was trying to scare you and run away. And so I stood there and I spoke out loud to it. I said, I've heard of you before. If there's anything you want to communicate to me, please try. But at that particular instance, heard nothing more of it. Now, on another occasion, in Lincoln Canyon, which is just north of Bradshaw Ranch, it actually feeds the waterway that runs through the ranch. We were doing some exploring in that direction because we had found one of our first Bigfoot prints up there, and we made a cast of it. And I think I may have sent a photograph of that one to you as well, complete with tarsal ridge and all. It stepped into a floodplain along that particular canyon and stepped in some thick mud and left 4 footprints, one of which we cast. And there's a really deep belt of foliage through that canyon, and someplace gaps where you can see through the dry wash. And while we were walking through that, Alexandra saw a very large creature with grayish fur rush past. And she was so taken back, she shouted at me to stop and said, "I just saw one of them. It just ran through the dry wash." Though it made not a sound. There, you would figure that the size these things are, they're displacing over 1,000 pounds. It was managing to walk, or run, I should say, without making a sound. So we got down into the dry wash, we could find no footprints at that time, nor could we hear any sounds of it walking or running away. And that was her first sighting of one of these creatures. Mine would come in a canyon called Boynton Canyon, where we were climbing a cliff. And I remember looking back. This is in broad daylight. We were trying to reach a cliff dwelling that we wanted to photograph and document with pictographs. And I turned around and looked behind me, and I saw what I at first thought was a bear climbing down to the edge of a cliffside. And then I saw long arms. It stood up, and it actually jumped off the cliff, and I saw long legs and long arms, and realized I was seeing my first Arizona Bigfoot. And again, it didn't make a sound, but it would have had to have hit very hard the cliff it jumped off of, but it made no sound whatsoever when it hit the canyon floor. We had to return that way, so when we returned, we were going much, much more slowly and being much more vigilant with our heads on a swivel, but saw nothing. And that was my own first encounter with the Arizona Bigfoot just north of Bradshaw Ranch.
Well, you believe that there's something underground, right?
I do. I'm very certain there's something underground here, which would probably be an entire another show for you, given the amount of time we have. Go ahead, Connie.
No, I'm just laughing because it's true. I mean, it's great. You're articulate. You really tell the story right. I love that. And you're right. It would be a whole nother story. I mean, you've been going there for a long time. You go like once or twice a week.
Yes,
and
11 years.
That's what's excellent. You know, when you get to go to these places exist. And when you know where they are and you can go to them and be a part of it, it just changes your world. You just don't think like other people. You know, it's just a whole lifestyle and a whole change. So I'm right there with you. So so we got several minutes left. Tell me about the unexplained explosions that you talk about.
Sure.
Or I got about a minute. So
okay. Those unexplained explosions are a relatively common phenomenon that other people hear. We first heard them just west of Bradshaw Ranch, climbing over a ridge. They were so loud, Connie, that they shook the ground under our feet. We heard 5 large explosions that I can only liken to the Navy's 16-inch guns on battleships, which I heard in Hawaii when I was there. They were that loud. Now you can go on a website to see if there's any blasting in the area, and it will tell you what types of blasting and exactly where. I checked it that night after I heard 5 explosions, and there was nothing. There was nothing listed from any of the mining companies or the local cement company or any of the other companies that do blasting that there had been any type of blasting of any kind. Yet we heard 5 distinct explosions. And that's actually another common unexplained phenomena here that also seems to emanate from underground. And I can tell you, it shook the ground under our feet, all 5 of them.
Hey, listen, I'm going to come out and join you one time if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
Okay, I'd love it. Hey, Jeremiah, thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much. Sorry we got to go. Thanks for all the stories and the encounters. And, hey, we'll have you back. Thanks so much. And we'll have you on Blue Rock Talk. Thank you. Jeremiah Horstman. And before that, we had Charles Ostman. So thank you guys, as well as thank them for showing up. It has been great. Hey, if you like the show, write in and let us know. From the foothills of the Colorado Rockies, Connie Willis here. Many thanks to Julie Talbot, Bill May, Lisa Lyon, Tommy Danheiser, Dan Galani, Stephanie Smith, Mike Cosio, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ledesor, Tim Banal, Gina Salvati, Donna Walker on the phones, Chris Burrows, Ian Punnett, Lisa Garr, Richard Searett, George Knapp, and, of course, the guy, George Norrie. The Coast to Coast AM team right there. And until we meet again, join me on Blue Rock Talk. Go to ConnieWillis.com. But keep watching the night skies. Continue with me to seek out the strange and uncover the unknown. For Coast to Coast AM, I'm Connie Willis. Good night. Good day.